internet, my name is Lave and I watched Thor Ragnarok, the latest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the third MCU film that we've got this year, and I was really looking forward to this one. I was secretly hoping that this might be the best of the bunch. I was so excited all day at work in the build up to go and see this. I was singing the music from the trailer all day. I was like dun 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 dun. Yeah, I was excited. So before I start, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. As I always say, if it's in the trailers, then it's fair game for me to talk about. So if you're one of the few people who hasn't seen the trailers, well done to you. But if you want to go in completely blind, then you should not watch this review. Go away. So this one picks up with Thor still investigating the Ragnarok visions that he had from Age of Ultron, when all of a sudden Hela, the god of death, turns up and invades Asgard and maroons him on another planet on the other side of the universe, where he must battle for survival and get back to Asgard to save his people. On the face of it, it's a really simple plot, and let me just get this out there now, it's a really entertaining, fun, kaleidoscope adventure of a film. I really enjoyed it. However, within this simple plot, there is a lot going on. The writers and the director Taika Waititi have got a lot to do. They've got to tie up loose ends and questions from the other films, like how did Hulk get to this planet? What's happening with Loki and Odin? And it does answer those questions to a certain degree. However, it's also got to tell its own story while introducing us to a host of new characters, and there are a lot, who also have to mingle with characters that we've already met, whilst at the same time they've got to progress the Marvel Cinematic Universe forward. And I do think that it's pretty successful, partly because it is so funny and it is such an enjoyable ride. Now, I know this isn't a new discussion, I'm not breaking any new grounds here, but it is pretty clear throughout Marvel's history that the studio bigwigs have an agenda. They are taking the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a certain direction, but they do at the same time also hire new, fresh and interesting directors to try and put their own stamps on it and tell individual stories. And with Thor Ragnarok, it definitely feels like the studio executives are like, this is the story that you're going to tell, these are the plot beats which we want you to hit, make it as funny and as stylized as possible, but do it this way. And remarkably, I do think it is successful. Taika Waititi has done what they asked whilst introducing and imprinting his own brand of humour in there with a whole host of new characters. But with all of this going on, with all of these agendas and all of these objectives, something along the line has to give, and I'm going to try and explain what I think that is without giving away any spoilers. So here we go. The first thing that I'll say is that something pretty significant happens, which on paper is meant to be a really emotional scene, but I found it weirdly emotionless because it feels like it was completely rushed just to get on with the plot and get the story moving. And that sense of eagerness to get on with the actual story that it's trying to tell is felt throughout. There are many characters from previous Thor films which have just glorified cameos. Literally, if you blink, you will miss them. Other characters are only referred to in passing lines of dialogue, and there are other characters which are just completely absent entirely. But I guess you don't really notice that because the movie just barrels along at a ferocious pace, but it does continue with the new characters. So Cate Blanchett turns up as Hela, who's really terrific. I thought she was really menacing. It's a really physical performance. She's absolutely great. However, they do resort to the trusted trope which is present in a lot of superhero films lately, of the character explaining her backstory whilst we see it animated through a mural or a book or something like that. We've seen that in Man of Steel. We saw it in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 this year. We saw it in Wonder Woman this year as well. And a similar thing happens with Jeff Goldblum's character, who's playing the Grand Master. Now again, it's terrifically cast. I love Jeff Goldblum and he's really funny in the scenes that he's in, but I just didn't feel like I saw enough of him. But perhaps the best example of this is Tessa Thompson's character, who's playing Valkyrie. Now again, I really loved her character and she's got a really interesting backstory which does get touched upon, but through the use of flashbacks. There's a really meaty story there and I wanted to know more about her. But again, I love Tessa Thompson's performance. She's really fantastic in it. She's got really good guns, and she's got really good guns. She's brilliant in everything I see her in. I loved her in Creed. I loved her in Westworld. She's a star on the rise. But again, I don't really feel like I got to know her, because then the movie introduces us to new characters. Carl Urban turns up as another Asgardian. Again, funny performance. Wasn't too sure on his Cockney accent, but again, funny performance. Taika Waititi has a small part as this brilliant character called Korg, this rock monster. I loved it. But again, it's just a funny character. Plus, I have to mention, which could possibly be the funniest joke in the film, involves certain celebrity cameos in a theatre production in the film. It was absolutely hilarious. I turned to my mate and I was like, oh my God, look at that. And they were like, yeah, brilliant. Now, there's plenty of other characters, many of whom you might recognise from Taika Waititi's other films, but I guess some of the disappointment lies in the fact that they also retread some of the character dynamics and character arcs, which I would argue we have already seen in previous Thor films. For example, Thor himself, once again played by Chris Hemsworth, who is arguably having the most fun this time round. He's great, but his character Thor, literally he's Thor at the beginning, and then he, for whatever reason, can't be Thor, so then he has to learn to be Thor again, but then he realises he's been Thor all along and has the power the whole time. Yeah, pretty sure we've seen variations of that in Thor 1. We've also seen the relationship that he has with his brother Loki, again played by Tom Hiddleston, who again is great, but it doesn't feel like it's developed, it's just continued. Easily the best relationship that Thor has throughout the entire film is with Hulk, who is absolutely amazing. The banter between them is so funny, and that extends into Bruce Banner, once again played by Mark Ruffalo. I really felt for him this time round. He's literally getting lost inside his monster. While I'm speaking about the Hulk, let's talk about some of the visual effects, which, being a Marvel film, there's a big budget for it, and for the most part it's really good. The Hulk himself, there were a few moments where I thought he looked a bit rubbery and a bit fake, but it was an absolute joy to see him in his Planet Hulk getup, even though it doesn't really follow the Planet Hulk storyline. It's a similar story with the rest of the visual effects as well. The majority of it is excellent. The world building is fantastic. I really like the new world that they visit. You get to explore Asgard a little bit more as well, but on occasions it is let down by some dodgy green screen, which gave me that Star Wars prequel vibe. But then I did see this in IMAX 3D, and sometimes I think the 3D effect can heighten that green screen effect, but sometimes it hides it, so I need to see this again in 2D to pass my final judgment on it. And I have to give credit to Taika Waititi, who doesn't come from a big visual effects action movie background, but you wouldn't guess it from this. The action scenes are all choreographed really well. I understood what was going on the whole time. Plus, you got a really awesome 80s synth soundtrack, which really ramps up the energy. Combine that with the cosmic Guardians of the Galaxy feel. It's a really fun, entertaining ride. My only gripe is that you never really got to dwell on the characters and get to know them. It really felt like they rushed to get to the end. So that's my thoughts on Thor Ragnarok, and pause the video if you want to take a closer look at my enjoyment tracker now. This is hands down the best Thor film that we've ever got. It's streets ahead of Thor The Dark World. I'm not sure that it's my favourite Marvel Cinematic Universe film this year. I think it's funnier than Guardians of the Galaxy, but it doesn't have that same emotional gut punch that film ended with. So I actually think that my favourite MCU film this year is Spider-Man Homecoming, not including Logan in this though. It is an extremely fun, enjoyable, entertaining film. Taika Waititi has managed to imprint his own style and humour into it, while at the same time you get the sense that he's pleasing the studio executives by moving the MCU forward. But I do think it has been at the expense of good character development, and as a result of that, some of the emotional driven scenes didn't really land for me. But you should absolutely go and see it, and I'm still going to buy it on Blu-ray because it's a Marvel film. That's what I do. So thanks very much for watching my review of Thor Ragnarok. I really do appreciate it. If you can, give this video a like, and don't forget to share the live. Subscribe.